My best friend appeared at my rehearsal dinner and said, "I want everyone to hear what the groom did during my test." My best friend walked into my rehearsal dinner like she owned the room and lifted my fiancé's phone over her head, announcing that everyone needed to hear what the groom did during her test. 70 guests froze in their seats at the country club banquet hall we had rented. Moments earlier, Alex and I had been laughing and clinking glasses at the head table. I stood up confused, asking what test she was talking about. Lauren paced between the tables, making sure every face was turned toward her. She said she had been testing Alex for the past month to make sure he deserved me and that he had failed. She waved the phone again as Alex rushed toward her, demanding she give it back, his face pale and his hands shaking. His mother already crying while his father looked ready to call security. Lauren said she had every right because she was the maid of honor and it was her job to protect the bride. She pulled a thick folder from her bag and began handing papers to every table, saying these were the results of her loyalty examination. She explained page 1 showed text messages Alex sent to a woman she hired to flirt with him at his gym. People stared at the papers, then at Alex, then at me. I grabbed one page and saw nothing but polite responses thanking the woman but reminding her he was engaged. I said these messages proved he was faithful and asked what her point was, but she had already distributed everything and said that was only the first test. She told everyone to turn to page 2, explaining she had created a fake social media account pretending to be his ex Hannah and messaged him. The page showed Alex responding that he was getting married and had moved on. Again, nothing inappropriate. I called her insane for catfishing my fiancé. Alex's brother Tyler stood up furious and said she had been stalking Alex for a month, following him to work and the gym and even showing up at his bachelor party dressed as a waitress. Lauren smiled proudly and said he did not even notice her, which proved he was drinking too much and that a good husband would have recognized his bride's best friend, even in disguise. Calling it strike 2, my mother Susan tried to calm things down, suggesting they talk privately, but Lauren pulled out her laptop and connected it to the venue screen meant for our engagement photos. She played grainy security footage of Alex entering his apartment building late at night, pointing out the timestamp and accusing him of lying about working late. Alex explained he had picked up my wedding gift and then had dinner with Tyler to calm his nerves and that his credit card would prove it. Lauren shook her head and said he should have been home studying the vows she wrote for him. She demanded he recite them and passed out another stack of papers. The vows were extreme promises about calling every hour and never having female friends. Alex said he never agreed to them and thought they were a joke slipped under his door. He said he had written his own real vows. Lauren turned to the crowd, saying a devoted groom would have memorized anything the maid of honor gave him. Then she clicked to another slide, showing a photo of Alex having lunch with a woman the day before the wedding. I immediately recognized his sister Megan, who had flown in for the wedding. Lauren insisted the behavior was intimate and that Megan touched his hand. Megan stood up horrified, saying she was his sister and asking what was wrong with Lauren. Lauren ignored her and announced the final test. She claimed she offered Alex $50,000 to call off the wedding and leave town, saying she could take care of me instead. She played a recording of Alex refusing any amount of money and calling her out of her mind. Relief washed over me, followed by a surge of anger so strong I could barely breathe. My best friend since childhood had tried to bribe my future husband to abandon me. I grabbed the phone from her hand and stared at her like she was a stranger. The room silent except for a grandmother coughing in the back. Hoax's father, Robert, stood up and told the country club manager to call security immediately. Lauren clutched her laptop and folder and tried to keep talking faster, insisting everyone needed to see the rest of her findings. She claimed she had documented everything and there were patterns proving Alex was not ready for marriage. Her hands shook as papers rattled. I looked around at confused faces. My grandmother crying into a napkin, cousins whispering, the wedding coordinator texting frantically. Our rehearsal dinner had turned into a public interrogation and I had no idea how to stop it. Susan approached Lauren gently like she was calming a scared animal. But Lauren shook her head, saying everyone needed to know what kind of man I was marrying before I made the biggest mistake of my life. Her voice sounded manic and desperate, nothing like the girl who braided my hair before dances and held my hand at funerals. Tyler stood up and confirmed Alex had been with him during the hours Lauren questioned, showing receipts, then revealed Lauren had followed them and watched from another table. The realization that she had been stalking Alex intentionally made the room feel smaller. Security arrived and asked Lauren to leave. She refused, saying she was protecting me. They stood on either side waiting. I finally found my voice and told her this was not protection but harassment and stalking. I listed everything she had done: hiring women to flirt, creating fake accounts, disguising herself, following him everywhere, each word breaking something between us forever. She looked confused, saying she had sacrificed her time and money for me, then began reading old texts between us out loud, highlighting every complaint I had ever made about Alex, interpreting normal couple stress as red flags. Alex collapsed into his chair with his head in his hands. His mother Linda stood behind him, gripping his shoulders and glaring at Lauren. I realized the man I loved had been stalked for weeks by someone he trusted because of me. My father Mark stood and told security to remove her immediately. Lauren began crying and begged me to listen, claiming she did it because she loved me. I asked her why she really did it, and she spoke about her sister's failed marriage and cheating husband, saying she could not let that happen to me. She expected understanding and gratitude. The coordinator whispered that we were over time and needed to wrap up. Exhaustion hit me, and I told Lauren she needed to leave now and we would talk later. She protested and reached for me, but I pulled away. Security escorted her out as she shouted that I was making a mistake. The doors closed and silence fell before everyone started talking at once. Families clustered, guests gathered coats, and I stood frozen wondering if my wedding could still happen. The coordinator pulled Alex and me aside and asked if we were proceeding tomorrow. Alex took my hand and said he still wanted to marry me if I wanted to marry him, his voice cracking. I said yes. We rushed through a short rehearsal with no applause, then left separately as planned. He kissed my forehead and drove away. My phone buzzed immediately with messages from Lauren apologizing and insisting she was right. I ignored them and drove to my parents' house where Susan waited with tea at the kitchen table where Lauren and I once did homework. My mother asked if I had noticed other concerning behavior. Memories surfaced of dress fittings and guest list fights, and constant questions about Alex's schedule. Patterns I had dismissed. My phone rang with a call from Megan saying Lauren had confronted her at the hotel and been escorted out. Shaken, I called Alex and learned Lauren was also messaging him articles and doubts. We stayed on the phone for hours talking through every accusation. He admitted, feeling violated and afraid of what she might do next. We hung up near midnight and I barely slept, waking to dozens of messages from Lauren explaining her methods and justifying her actions. My bridesmaids arrived, whispering about whether she would show up. At 9 I called Lauren and told her she was no longer maid of honor and not welcome. She begged, then turned angry and threatened more evidence. I blocked her number, shaking. Sat on the bathroom floor crying as my mother held me, trying to accept that my best friend was gone and my wedding day had arrived under a shadow that would not easily lift. My mother stayed with me on the bathroom floor until my breathing slowed. Then she helped me back into the chair so the stylist could fix my makeup without asking questions. The room felt heavy and quiet except for the soft movements around me. My bridesmaids tried to act normal but their eyes kept flicking to the door and their phones. One of them finally admitted they had always thought Lauren could be intense. Another added she used to get upset when I made plans without her. Piece by piece stories came out about controlling behavior they never mentioned because they did not want to hurt me, they explained. Lauren had called each of them during the last month asking for details about Alex and our relationship. She wanted schedules and opinions and any concerns they had noticed. She even tried to create a shared document to track his social media activity. They all declined but assumed it was harmless. Hearing this made my chest ache because so many signs had been there and I had brushed them aside, trusting the history we shared instead of what was right in front of me. The realization settled slowly and painfully as the final touches were added to my hair and veiled dust. As I started to feel steady again, my phone buzzed on the vanity and showed the wedding coordinator calling. Her voice came through tense and apologetic saying Lauren had shown up at the venue with more folders and was causing a scene in the parking lot. Early guests could see her and hear her. My mother took the phone and asked questions while my father pulled on his jacket without a word. He said he would handle it and left immediately. I sat frozen as the room buzzed with quiet urgency, trying not to cry again and undo everything that had just been fixed. When my father called back, he said he convinced Lauren to leave by promising a future conversation, something he admitted quietly I did not need to honor. Security had her photo and would not let her back in. Relief washed over me mixed with guilt that my parents were dealing with this on my wedding day. My mother helped me into my dress and buttoned it carefully while I stared at my reflection. Despite everything, I still wanted to marry Alex. The chaos had only shown me how steady and honest he was under pressure. We drove to the venue in silence, and I focused on the rhythm of the road and the weight of the bouquet in my hands. The coordinator met us with reassurance that everything was under control. In the bridal suite, my bridesmaids fussed over final details while I tried to keep my stomach calm. When it was time to line up, my father offered his arm and squeezed it gently. The music started and we stepped forward into the ceremony space, filled with familiar faces and soft light. My eyes locked on Alex, standing at the altar. His expression held relief and emotion, and something stronger than fear. The ceremony moved forward smoothly with no interruptions, though I scanned the room out of habit. When we reached our vows, Alex spoke about trust and protecting our relationship from outside interference. His voice caught, and I squeezed his hand. My vows echoed the same promise to choose each other even when others tried to step between us. When we were pronounced married, applause filled the space, and for the first time all day, I felt a sense of peace settle in my chest. The reception guests approached us quietly, offering apologies and encouragement. Alex's mother Linda hugged me tightly and told me she was proud of how I handled everything. During dinner, my phone buzzed with messages from an unknown number showing photos of Alex and me with strange captions. Analyzing our body language, we realized Lauren was still trying to reach us using another phone. Without discussion, Alex and I turned our phones off and handed them to the coordinator. Deciding this night would belong to a sour first dance felt like a release. Alex whispered that if we survived this, we could survive anything. I laughed for the first time in days and believed him. Later, Megan pulled me aside and spoke about how worried she was about Lauren and how disconnected she seemed. She suggested Lauren needed professional help. Her words stayed with me as the night wound down. My father gave a toast filled with love and quiet vigilance. His eyes never fully relaxed. But the evening passed without further disruption. When the reception ended, Alex and I left together exhausted and emotionally drained. In the car, we finally talked about what came next, agreeing we needed clear boundaries and possibly legal help if Lauren continued. At the hotel, I unblocked her number briefly to document messages. Dozens poured in, ranging from anger to apologies. Reading them hurt, but also confirmed we were doing the right thing. We turned our phones off again and promised to deal with everything after our honeymoon in Italy. was beautiful, but the shadow followed me at first. I checked my phone too often until Alex gently asked me to be present. I put it away and slowly allowed myself to enjoy the trip. We explored quiet streets and shared meals and talked about our future. 4 days Lauren faded into the background, until an email from my mother explained Lauren had sat outside their house for hours. That fear returned instantly, and Alex and I agreed this pattern could not be ignored. We decided to enjoy the rest of the trip and address it when we returned. And for a while it worked. When we came home, a package waited outside our door. Inside was a scrapbook documenting my entire friendship with Lauren, beautiful and painful at the same time. A note said she stood by her actions and believed protecting me was worth losing our friendship. I cried, looking through the pages, and then placed it out of sight. Knowing love did not excuse what she had done, I scheduled therapy soon after and began unpacking emotions I could not handle alone. Grief, anger, betrayal, guilt, all tangled together. Days later my mother called, saying Lauren was trying to get our address. That was the moment. Fear replaced nostalgia. Alex and I contacted a lawyer and began taking steps to protect ourselves. It felt unreal and heavy but necessary. And as we sat together that night, I understood this was no longer about a broken friendship. It was about safety and the future we were determined to protect. The lawyer's office was quiet and orderly and made everything feel more real than I wanted. Alex and I sat side by side explaining the situation from the beginning. The month of surveillance, the gym setup, the fake messages, the disguise at the bachelor party, the rehearsal dinner explosion, the harassment of Megan, the parking lot scene, the emails and texts, the scrapbook, the hours Lauren spent watching my parents' house. The lawyer listened without interrupting and took careful notes. When we finished, she said the pattern was clear and deeply concerning and that we had grounds to protect ourselves. Legally, she explained our options slowly and calmly. A restraining order was possible but intense. She suggested starting with a formal cease and desist letter, a legal notice demanding Lauren stop all contact with us and our families, sent in a way that confirmed receipt. If Lauren ignored it, the documentation would strengthen any future action. The idea of sending a legal letter to my best friend since childhood made my stomach churn, but I nodded because doing nothing felt worse. Alex squeezed my hand and we agreed this was the first step we could live with. When the draft arrived by email 2 days later, it was blunt and official, listing every incident and demanding all contact end immediately. Reading it felt like closing a door on a life I used to know, but it also felt like drawing a line that should have been drawn long ago. We approved it and the lawyer sent it certified mail. She told us we would be notified when Lauren signed for it. After that we waited, and the waiting was almost worse than the chaos. For several days, nothing happened and I allowed myself to hope the letter worked. Then an envelope appeared in our mailbox with Lauren's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it alone at the kitchen table. Inside was a long handwritten letter filled with apologies, explanations, and fear. She wrote about her sister's marriage, her father leaving, her terror of losing me. She said she knew her actions were extreme but believed they were justified. I cried reading it because I could see her pain clearly, but understanding her fear did not erase the damage she caused. I forwarded the letter to our lawyer and placed the original in a drawer with everything else. A week later, I sat in my first therapy session and cried through most of it, telling the story from second grade onward. My therapist listened and said something that stuck with me: that grief and boundaries can exist together, that I could mourn the friendship while still protecting myself. Hearing that allowed me to breathe a little easier for the first time in weeks. 2 weeks after the cease and desist, Alex called me from work with tension in his voice. Lauren had shown up at his office building, insisting she needed to see him. Security refused her entry, and eventually forced her to leave. The entire interaction was captured on camera. The letter she had signed told her explicitly not to do this. That night, we retrieved the footage and sent it to the lawyer. The escalation made the decision clear, even if it hurt. The lawyer called the next morning and said, we now had strong evidence to file for a restraining order. Alex and I talked for hours about it, about how final it felt, about the girl who used to share secrets with me under blankets and now stood outside offices demanding access to my husband. In the end, safety outweighed nostalgia and we told the lawyer to proceed. A court date was set and the weeks leading up to it were filled with constant low-level fear. Every unexpected noise made me jump. Alex walked me to my car after work. We checked locks twice before bed. When the day of the hearing arrived, we dressed carefully and drove downtown in silence. The courtroom felt cold and formal. Lauren sat alone at the other table, wearing wrinkled clothes and avoiding my eyes. Seeing her like that hurt more than anger ever could. Our lawyer presented everything methodically: messages, photos, timelines, witness statements, footage. The judge listened intently. When Lauren spoke, she said she was only trying to protect me and that her actions came from love. The judge asked if she understood that her behavior qualified as stalking and harassment under the law. She said she did not see it that way but understood that we did. After reviewing the evidence, the judge granted a 1-year restraining order requiring Lauren to stay away from us and prohibiting all contact. Lauren cried quietly as the ruling was explained. When it ended, Alex and I walked out holding hands. Relief and grief tangled together so tightly I could barely tell them apart. In the parking lot, I broke down and cried against his shoulder. The friendship was truly over now, and there was no pretending otherwise. Alex held me without trying to fix it, and that was exactly what I needed. In the months that followed, Lauren stayed away. Rumors filtered through mutual acquaintances that she had started therapy and was asking about me indirectly. I felt relief knowing she was getting help, and sadness knowing it came at the cost of our bond. Therapy became a weekly anchor for me as I worked through guilt and anger and the long, slow acceptance that love does not excuse harm. Alex and I settled into married life with more intention than we might have otherwise. We talked openly about fears and boundaries. We built routines and leaned on our families who had stood by us through everything. Slowly the constant tension faded and life began to feel normal again. Not unchanged but steadier. And as time passed, I understood that surviving this had not broken us. It had taught us how fiercely we needed to protect the life we were building together. Life did not magically settle the moment the restraining order was granted. Instead, it eased forward slowly like a wound, learning how to close. Alex and I moved through our days with caution at first, listening for footsteps in the hallway and double-checking locks without saying a word. But week by week the fear loosened its grip. Lauren stayed away completely, and the silence she left behind was heavy but safer than the chaos she brought. My therapy sessions became a place where I could say everything I did not want to burden Alex with. I talked about second-grade sleepovers and shared notebooks and how Lauren and I once promised we would grow old side by side. I talked about the guilt that still surfaced when I remembered her crying in court. My therapist reminded me repeatedly that compassion did not require access and that caring about someone did not mean allowing them to harm me. Those words settled into me gradually instead of all at once, supported me in quiet, steady ways. He never rushed my healing or dismissed my sadness. He asked how my sessions went and listened without trying to solve anything. We made a habit of checking in with each other at the end of each day, sharing one good thing and one hard thing. It helped us stay connected and prevented fear from growing in silence. We learned that communication was not just talking but creating safety for honesty. Our families stayed close during that time. My parents invited us for dinner often, and his mother Linda called every Sunday just to hear our voices. There was comfort in knowing we were surrounded by people who believed us and did not question our choices. After everything that had happened, that kind of support felt grounding. It reminded me that I was not cruel or dramatic for setting boundaries. I was protected and believed. As months passed, I noticed I could think about Lauren without my chest tightening immediately. Sometimes, memories surfaced unexpectedly, like seeing a childhood photo or driving past our old school. The sadness still came, but it no longer knocked the air out of me. Therapy helped me understand that grief does not disappear but changes shape. It becomes something you can carry instead of something that carries. 6 months after the wedding, Alex and I marked the date quietly at home. We cooked dinner together and talked about how far we had come. The rehearsal dinner felt like a lifetime ago, even though the memory was still sharp. Alex said he was grateful we had not allowed fear to turn us against each other, that we chose trust instead of suspicion. Hearing that made me realize how easily things could have gone differently if we had let Lauren's narrative take root. The restraining order loomed in the background with its expiration date months away. We agreed not to obsess over it until we had to. For now, the space it provided was enough. I continued therapy and worked on releasing the responsibility I felt for Lauren's choices. My therapist helped me see that I was not responsible for saving her or fixing what had been broken long before. Alex ever entered my life. Occasionally news about Lauren reached me through indirect channels. A coworker mentioning she was seeing a therapist regularly. A mutual acquaintance saying she seemed quieter and more withdrawn. Each update stirred complicated emotions. Part of me hoped she was healing, and part of me felt the ache of knowing that healing would never include me again. I learned to sit with both feelings without trying to resolve them. Alex and I moved to a new apartment across town. Not because we were afraid, but because we wanted a fresh start. Unpacking boxes together felt symbolic. We argued about where to place furniture and laughed about how different our routines were. Those small, ordinary moments felt precious after everything we endured. They reminded me that peace is often quiet and unremarkable, and that was exactly what I wanted. One afternoon, my mother called to tell me she ran into one of Lauren's coworkers who mentioned Lauren had been asking how I was, without violating the restraining order. I felt a flicker of sadness, but also relief that she was respecting the boundary. It reinforced that the legal step we took had been necessary. Structure was something Lauren needed when emotions overtook reason, and distance was what I needed to. Healing therapy, we talked about identity beyond long-term friendships, about who I was without defining myself as Lauren's other half. It felt strange at first, like learning to walk differently, but gradually I discovered parts of myself that had been quiet for years. I took a pottery class, reconnected with an old college friend, and allowed myself to grow without explaining every choice to someone else. Alex noticed the changes and encouraged them. He said he loved watching me rediscover pieces of myself. Our relationship deepened as we supported each other's growth, rather than clinging to familiarity. Surviving something traumatic together had created a bond that felt intentional and resilient. We knew what it meant to protect our marriage, and we did it consciously every day. As the restraining order expiration drew closer, we began discussing what came next. Not with panic but with care. We agreed that renewal would depend on Lauren's behavior and our sense of safety. Our lawyer assured us that we could make that decision when the time came, and that documentation would support us either way. Having options made the future feel manageable rather than threatening. I continued to grieve the version of Lauren I once knew, the girl who shared lunches and secrets and dreams. But I no longer confused that person with who she became. Therapy helped me separate memory from reality, love from obligation, History from permission. I learned that some relationships are meant to shape you and then end. Even when the ending is painful and unexpected. One evening, Alex and I sat on the couch talking about the future. Children, careers, travel, all the normal conversations that had felt distant during the chaos. I realized how grateful I was that we had not postponed our lives indefinitely waiting for Lauren to stabilize. Choosing ourselves did not mean abandoning compassion. It meant acknowledging limits. And that distinction mattered more than I ever understood before. When our first anniversary approached, I felt a mix of pride and disbelief. We had navigated a year marked by love and loss and emerged stronger than I thought possible. The trauma did not define us, but it shaped how intentionally we lived. I understood now that protecting my marriage sometimes meant letting go of people I once thought would always be part of my story. As the seasons changed and life continued, Lauren became a quieter presence in my mind, no longer a constant ache but a chapter I could reflect on without unraveling. I accepted that closure does not always come through conversation or understanding. Sometimes it comes through distance and time. And sometimes it comes through choosing peace even when it costs you something precious. When our first anniversary arrived, it felt surreal that an entire year had passed since the rehearsal dinner that shattered everything I thought I knew. Alex and I stayed home that night ordering takeout from the restaurant where we had our first date. Sitting on the couch flipping through wedding photos, we talked about how close we came to letting fear and chaos rewrite our story, and how choosing each other again and again had been the quiet decision that saved us. The restraining order was set to expire in a few months and the date hovered at the back of my mind like a distant storm. But it no longer ruled my days. Therapy had helped me build a sense of safety that did not rely entirely on legal documents. I understood now that boundaries were not punishments but protections, not just from others but for myself. The constant guilt I once carried had softened into something manageable and no longer dictated my choices through mutual acquaintances. I learned that Lauren was still in therapy and had taken a leave from work. Some people said she was doing better and others said she kept mostly to herself. Each update stirred something quiet inside me, but it no longer demanded action. I wished her healing without feeling responsible for it. That shift felt like real growth, the kind that comes only after letting go of what you cannot fix. Alex remained steady through all of it, never pushing me toward forgiveness or reconciliation, never encouraging bitterness either. He trusted me to find my own balance. We continued our nightly check-ins and open conversations. The habits we built during crisis became the foundation of our marriage. We knew how easily outside voices could distort trust, and we protected that trust fiercely. When the lawyer called to remind us the restraining order was nearing expiration, we sat together and talked honestly about how we felt. Neither of us felt ready to reopen contact or loosen boundaries, not because we were angry but because peace mattered more than nostalgia. We chose to renew the order for another year, making the decision calmly and without the panic that once defined everything connected to Lorenzening. The renewal paperwork brought an unexpected wave of sadness. It felt like officially acknowledging that the friendship would never return in any form, even a distant one. I cried that night, and Alex held me as I grieved, not just Lauren but the version of myself who believed love alone could fix anything. Therapy had taught me that growth often includes mourning who you used to be. Over time, my life expanded in ways that had nothing to do with loss. Alex and I hosted small dinners with friends and filled our apartment with laughter. I advanced at work and took pride in accomplishments that belonged solely to me. We planned trips and talked about the future with excitement instead of anxiety. The shadow that once followed every plan slowly faded into the background. One afternoon, while cleaning, I found the scrapbook Lauren had sent tucked away on the top shelf. I sat on the floor flipping through it slowly. The memories still hurt, but they no longer pulled me backward. I was able to appreciate the good years without letting them justify the harm that came later. I placed the scrapbook back where it belonged, not as a wound but as a record of a chapter that shaped me and ended in therapy. I finally said out loud that I did not hate Lauren, and that realization surprised me. What I felt was distance and acceptance and a firm understanding of limits. My therapist smiled and said that was often the healthiest outcome, not forgiveness that erases harm but clarity that honors truth. I left that session lighter than I had in a long time. Alex and I talked about children someday, and how we would teach them about boundaries and trust, about how love does not mean surrendering yourself, about how relationships require respect to survive. We knew our experience had given us lessons we never asked for but would carry forward intentionally. Our marriage was not built on perfection but on resilience and choices. Another year unfolded. Life continued to be imperfect and ordinary in the best way. We argued about small things and made up quickly. We supported each other through stress and celebrated quiet wins. The trauma did not disappear, but it stopped defining us. It became one thread in a much larger story we were still writing together. I no longer checked over my shoulder or flinched at unknown numbers. The fear that once lived in my body had eased, replaced by confidence in my ability to protect myself and my marriage. I trusted my instincts now, instead of dismissing them out of loyalty or history. That trust was something Lauren had unintentionally forced me to develop. Sometimes I still thought about the girl I met in second grade and wondered how things might have been different if fear had not shaped her choices so deeply. I hoped she found peace and healthier ways to cope with her fears, but I accepted that my life could not include her. That acceptance no longer felt cruel. It felt honest. Standing in my kitchen one quiet evening watching Alex cook dinner, I felt grateful for the life we built out of something that could have destroyed us. We did not let obsession or betrayal dictate our future. We chose boundaries and honesty, and love rooted in respect. The cost was high, but the result was a marriage grounded in clarity and strength. Looking back, I understood that losing my best friend was one of the most painful experiences of my life, but it taught me lessons I would carry forever. About trust, about self-protection, about the difference between love and control. Those lessons became part of me not as scars but as wisdom. Our story did not end with forgiveness or reconciliation. It ended with peace, and that was enough. Alex and I moved forward together, not untouched by what happened, but stronger for having faced it side by side. The chaos faded into memory, and what remained was a life built intentionally, with boundaries respected and love chosen every single day.